Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. On behalf of everyone at Rev.io, I'd like to thank you for joining us today. Before we begin the presentation, I would like to go over a few housekeeping items. First, audio will automatically come in through your speakers. However, if you're having trouble using your speakers or unhappy with the quality of the sound, you can also dial in via phone number and access code listed on the screen. Second, a recorded version of this webinar will be emailed to you within 2 weeks. Third, we will be having a Q&A session at the end of the event. Please submit your questions via the GoToWebinar control panel at any point during the live presentation. For those of you just joining us, welcome. Today, Poly's Director of Global ITSP Sales, Darren Knapp, Head of Global Service Provider Marketing, Jeff Kubik, and Senior Director Poly Capital, Tom Mace, will be discussing how Device as a Service transforms a hardware necessity into a growth opportunity. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce Darren, Jeff, and Tom. Darren Knapp is Poly's Director of ITSP Sales and leads sales and business development efforts from Alaska to Argentina. Prior to his 19-year telecom career, he also toured for 15 years with the USO and a hard rock band, entertaining U.S. military personnel all over the world. Darren is passionate about Poly's mission to power authentic human connection and collaboration, and loves to evangelize and demonstrate Poly's long list of awesome tech. Jeff Kubik leads the cloud service provider marketing efforts at Poly globally. Before joining Poly in 2019, Jeff held marketing and product leadership roles at 2 cloud communication service providers, both who were Poly customers. Tom Mace, Senior Director, Poly Capital, has 30+ years in the finance industry. Now I'll turn it over to Darren, Jeff, and Tom.
Hi, thanks, Delaney. This is Jeff Kubik with Poly. As Delaney said in the introduction, I started working with Poly about a year ago, but prior to that, worked in marketing and product for a couple of different service providers. And in that role, many years ago, back in probably about 14 or 15 years ago, at one of those service providers, we began offering a device as a service offering, a OpEx rental option. We didn't have a program like the Poly DaaS program at the time, so we did it as a self-funded rental program, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But I come at this and device as a service with a deep passion and a deep understanding of the success that service providers can have by deploying a device as a service option for their customers for UC endpoints. And what we're going to cover today is I'll talk about the first 2 sections here. So just talking about what are the market drivers behind device as a service, and then what are the drivers at the service provider level that are leading to device as a service gaining traction and gaining popularity. I'll hand it over to Tom to talk about the Poly Device as a Service program, and then Darren will close it out at the end for us and talk about how you as a service provider can begin to offer DaaS to your customers. So just let's start off with the basic understanding of kind of a general idea of what device as a service is. Device as a service basically takes equipment and then value-added services like extended warranties or enhanced support and combines them together into an as-a-service model. So it's a subscription model where your end customer is essentially renting the device from you. Typically, there's either no or a very short minimum term commitment on device as a service, and you can have an extended warranty or damaged device replacement is often added as part of the device as a service offering. And with device as a service, you have flexibility to adjust the number of devices. You can upgrade devices along the way. You can swap out devices. If there's a change, you can either grow the number that you have or reduce the number that you have over time. So let's kick it off with a understanding of the market drivers that are out there. So when enterprises are making IT purchasing decisions and setting goals for their technology investments, there's a couple of high-level categories that they're looking at when making those decisions and considerations that they take into account. So first of all, they want the decisions to support the business goals of the enterprise. It has to be aligned with what the overall direction of the business is. They're looking to reduce risk, so they want to make sure that they're not making a long-term investment into something or getting locked into some type of technology that's going to come back and limit their ability to be flexible in the future. They want to manage costs better, and they want to improve their agility, so their ability to kind of pivot and move with the market and with competition in the market. And so Frost and Sullivan had done a survey of enterprise IT managers and where or the drivers that are influencing their investment decisions and their overall strategy and goals for their investments. And pretty much across the board, 3/4 of them or more said that there was a degree of importance to these different areas. So looking to shift costs from a capital and upfront expense to an operating budget expense. Looking to reduce the costs for hardware and software maintenance. Looking to increase business agility and be more responsive to the market. And then also looking to be able to take advantage of new technologies as they come out. And so all of these things really lend themselves well to device as a service. It basically is a great fit for all of these different areas. And then from a decision-making standpoint, we have some of those key goals listed along the left-hand side. And over on the right-hand side of the screen here is a list of some of the different options for acquiring endpoints. So companies can purchase them up front, do a one-time payment and take ownership of the device. They can do a lease where they take ownership, but they're paying for it over time. And then the third option is a device as a service option. And the color coding that we've added here basically reflects how well those different models align with the key goals over on the left-hand side. And so as you can see, device as a service really fits most of those well. It's an operating expense for the companies. They're not really owning the assets. They get an extended warranty as part of that. They have the ability and the flexibility to upgrade equipment, to take advantage of new technology. They're not locked into long-term contracts. And so, if you look at this, really device as a service is the best fit for those different drivers in the enterprise investment, IT investment space. And this is also reflected in a survey that Numerities did of end customers and their interest in using DaaS as a way to buy things like phones and headsets. And so the darker green color here, about a third of the respondents said that for both phones and headsets, they would prefer to buy those devices or to acquire those devices using a DaaS model. Another almost 50% said that they would have an interest in using DaaS, but it would depend on what the price was. And then the remaining 20% or so said that they have either no interest in DaaS or they were unsure. And it was pretty much split evenly. That 20% was pretty much split about 10% between unsure and would not have an interest in DaaS. So the vast majority, close to 80% of the respondents to the survey, in enterprise IT investment space, indicated that they would have an interest in using DaaS as a model to acquire both phones and headsets for their business. And So there's the interest out there in the market. The customers have the interest; they're willing to do it. But there's also the service provider side of the equation. And Frost and Sullivan had asked service providers about whether they were offering DaaS or some type of operating expense, a rental model to their customers, and then whether they were leading with that offer or whether they were just had the offer, but they didn't lead with it and they made it available to customers if they asked for it. So the first graph on the left shows that 70 to 9 for the service providers that both offered an operating expense model for acquiring phones and led with that offer. So they put that out there first. They kind of came in with a rental-based or DaaS-based offer. 70 to 90% of their base of customers were under that model because they had made that recommendation to them. For the ones that didn't lead with that offer, who made it just available if the customer asked for it, only about 5 to 30% of their base of customers actually were under that operating expense model. So that's why it's key as part of this to take advantage of that interest in the customers to really lead with that offer. As we saw on the previous slide, 80% of customers or so are interested in that device as a service approach. And when you suggest that to them, they are taking advantage of that and going with that because it's been put in front of them as an option. And so now from the service provider side, there's a slightly different equation. Obviously, the service provider is looking at similar drivers to the enterprise, but they have their own drivers that are driving their decisions around how they're going to offer certain things. So service providers are looking to increase their sales velocity, so to close deals faster, to get those installed faster, and to get them billing faster so that they can increase their revenue base. They're looking to increase those recurring revenues, increase cash flow, and to get better margins out of the services that they're offering. At the same time, they're also looking to reduce the churn in their customer base and reduce the overall risk that they have to their business from things like churn and other aspects like warranty repairs, et cetera. And all of these drivers really lead to high-level things that the service providers are looking for. So they're looking to grow their business. They're looking to become more profitable. And all of these things also lead to a greater valuation of the business should they ever decide to sell the business. And so how does DaaS then play into and help support each of these key drivers? Well, first of all, from a sales velocity standpoint, DaaS removes that upfront cost. So they're removing that hurdle of having to have a large upfront payment that the customer has to make. By removing that, they're eliminating one of the potential points of friction during the sales process. DaaS also, just by the nature of what it is, it's a rental option, turns equipment into a service with a monthly recurring charge. So DaaS creates additional recurring revenues for the service provider. From a cash flow standpoint, DaaS basically aligns costs and revenues together, both as monthly charges. So rather than having to pay for a phone upfront and then rent it over time, or have some carrying cost for that, the DaaS program allows the service provider to get charged a monthly charge for the phone from a third party, and then in turn they can charge their customers at the same time. So the cash flow in and cash flow out are matched in terms of the timing. From a margin standpoint, DaaS provides higher margins than a one-time upfront sale would normally provide, and we'll show that in a little bit with a model that we have showing the differences between the different approaches. DaaS also lowers the cost of churn because if you have a customer churn, they're not returning devices back to you that you have to then put back into your inventory and hold on to. Those phones can then are returned back to the third-party DaaS provider, and the service provider ends up, once they return those phones to the DaaS provider, they end up the payments for those also end up ending once those are returned. So they don't have to carry those in inventory and hold on to them and worry about making additional payments or having it sit on their books during that time. And then from a risk standpoint, DaaS also reduces the risk compared to a service provider funded rental model for the same reasons that I just talked about, that you don't have the warranty costs, you don't have the inventory cost, you don't have that risk of churn involved. And so what we did is we went and took a look at 3 different device sales model comparisons, or did a comparison of those 3 different models. So an upfront sale versus a service provider self-funded rental program versus the device as a service program. And we compared both the cash flow of those different options, as well as the product gross margins, and then also took a look at the pros and cons of each of the different models. And we assumed in this model that we were talking about a sort of a mid-range VoIP phone, and we actually looked at certain service providers, and we used those costs and pricing examples as the basis for the numbers that we plugged in terms of pricing. And we did that comparison over a 3-year period. So we used a 3-year window for the assessment, but did not take into account some of the more complicated tax benefits or interest costs involved in that. And so here's what we found. So from an upfront sale, you basically have the service provider buys the phone, and then they turn around and resell it to a customer for an upfront charge. And typically as part of that, with most phones, you have a 1, maybe a 2-year manufacturer's warranty, but we just assumed a 1-year warranty here. With the self-funded model, the service provider buys the phone, and then they're turning around and they're renting it on a monthly basis. They're charging a customer monthly for that. The device as a service model, the service provider is renting, they're ordering the phone, but they're getting it from a third-party DaaS provider, and they're paying a monthly rental fee to that DaaS provider. And then they're turning around and they could choose to either include it in an overall bundle or package, or they could rent it as a standalone price for that, monthly price for that phone. And so what we found just using these assumptions here is that the self-funded rental program does slightly better in terms of cash flows over the 3-year than the DaaS program, and both of them do much better, almost 2.5 to 3 times better than an upfront sale. And you also have higher gross margins from the DaaS or rental programs. But as you can see here, the difference between the self-funded program and the DaaS program, so the self-funded program where the service provider owns the phone and takes responsibility for the warranty cost, the churn, et cetera, there's really only a $6 difference, actually less than $6 between the 2 different models. And so, you know, for that extra cash flow and margin that the service providers are taking on, they're also taking on a lot of additional risk and responsibility. And so we also looked at some of the business factors involved with the different models. And as you can see, with that service provider rental model, the service provider does get better cash flow, better margin, but they are also taking on the risk for the enhanced warranty and any service that's offered. They have that churn risk. They're also using their cash or a credit line to fund the acquisition of those devices. And so they're reduced, you know, by using that, they don't have that funding available for other growth initiatives. And so, the small additional benefit that they're gaining in terms of the additional cash flow and margin is really offset by some of these other risks. Whereas the device as a service model really eliminates a lot of those risks and makes it the best overall risk reward calculation for the service provider. So just to start to close out here, as I said before, the reasons that you want to offer DaaS is to help drive customer demand, to help improve your competitiveness, to create new value for your customers and your programs, to help differentiate your offering, and also to grow recurring revenues. And the different quotes that are shown here are all from different Frost and Sullivan reports, where they talk about device and how it's a key driver for service provider and for equipment now and going forward into the future. They see it as a growth area for service providers. So finally, when you're taking a look at those device sales models, obviously you have to do your own assessment and your own evaluation of which model might work best for your business. But there's several different questions that you should ask as you start to consider what model do I want to look at. And I will say up front that I think you need to offer both an upfront option as well as a monthly recurring option to maximize the opportunities that you have available to you. There's going to be cases where one really fits better for a customer than another, and by having both, you're maximizing your chance to win those deals. But some of the questions to ask are, do we have sufficient access to funding to run our own program? Do we have the staff and resources to manage all of these phones and returns and to do that ourselves, or are those resources better used on other things than managing those devices coming in and going out? What is the best use of the available funds that we have? What are our competitors doing? What device offerings will help me to differentiate my offer from my competitors? If a customer churns, what am I going to be on the hook for if I own those devices myself? Or if the customer goes out of business and I have a bad debt? And then, finally, what's the additional cost? What cost am I taking on by providing an extended warranty or damage coverage on a device? And so, those are all things that you can use to help guide your assessment of the different models and figure out whether DaaS is the right model for you going forward. And with that, I will turn it over to Tom to run through the Poly Device as a Service program.
Thanks, Jeff. Since I don't have control, can you switch it to the next slide there? Thanks. So as a bit of background here on why we created this program, we were hearing things from our service provider partners like, your devices are more expensive than your competition. We're practically having to give the device away to get the service, and it's killing our margins. We've got more and more customers coming to us and saying, we don't want to pay anything up front. We don't want to lease the devices separately. We want you as a provider to give us everything for one monthly payment. And then, oh, by the way, what happens if the customer cancels and the devices come back? So we created this program to try and solve all of those situations. Now, we do this through a third party, but the concept is the same. The devices are rented to you as a service provider on a month-to-month basis, and you can on-rent them to your customer as part of your overall service offering under whatever terms you deem appropriate. You can't sell them because you don't own the device, but if you want to do it on a month-to-month basis, on a one-year basis, a two-year basis, a three-year basis, whatever you deem appropriate. If that customer cancels and the devices come back to our third party and they're not damaged, the billing to you stops. Again, it's a true month-to-month rental. It also comes with a 7-year replacement plan, which basically says, hey, if that device happens to stay out there for up to 7 years and it fails, we'll replace it. So from an operational standpoint, you'll get qualified with our third party. You'll sign the documents with them. When you place your purchase order with your distributor, you'll instruct them that you want it on the device as a service program. The distributor does everything that they're supposed to do to those devices and sends them to wherever you tell them to send them to. They send the invoice to our third party. Our third party pays them 100% of that invoice amount and begins billing you monthly. Typically, the way that'll work is they'll bundle all of those invoices together so that you as a service provider only have one payment date a month. If a customer calls up and says, hey, I've got a problem with this device, you do your due diligence and determine that it is a failed device. You'll log into our portal, put in the details. We send out a new device next business day delivery and a prepaid shipping label for the customer to ship the old device back. If the customer cancels, they can't stand the service, they can't stand the phones, whatever reason, you will notify our third party. You will have the devices sent back to them. They'll usually take a day to inspect them. Once they're inspected, the billing to you stops. Relatively simple process. If we talk about amounts, typically what you're going to do is you're going to take your cost of the device plus the cost of the 7-year replacement and multiply it by a rate factor. As an example, let's say that it's a $100 device, one of our base model VBXs, and the cost of the 7-year replacement is about $14. So you'll take 114, multiply it by approximately 0.029, which means that your billing will be about $3.30, and you can rent that to the customer for as much as you deem appropriate. As an example, let's say you're renting that out for $5 a month. So you're making about $1.70 or so each month, and let's say it's a 36-month contract. At the end of that 36 months, you've made about $61 on that $100 device. If we talk about some sales motions, obviously, like Jeff pointed out in the beginning, this is a great method for you to break down doors. You can go to that customer and say, forget about any upfront cost. I can supply you with everything, and here's your monthly payment. In addition, there's a stickiness factor. If a customer purchases the devices up front and owns them and finds someone who can give them the service for $1 less a month, as a for instance, they can certainly cancel with you and switch to that other provider. Under this model, they have to return the devices. So it's a lot more cumbersome. Therefore, they're a lot more likely to stick with you. In addition, let's say you sign a 3-year contract. Comes time for that contract to be renewed, you can go out to your customer and say, listen, renew with me for another 3 years, and if you want, I'll replace your existing devices with the latest and greatest. And oh, by the way, your monthly payment stays the same, and you've got them locked in for another month. Jeff pointed out earlier some of the percentages of deals that were going out on DaaS. Our first service provider who got on this program initially was a little bit nervous about it, went out to a couple of existing customers and several customers that they were bidding on initially with cash, asking the customer to pay cash, and said, what happens if we do it this way? According to their CEO, all 3 of the customers that they were bidding on decided they wanted this model, and 1 out of the 2 existing customers immediately decided they wanted that model, and with about a month and a half, the other customer decided that as well. So today, and this is according to the CEO, 98.9% of their deals go out on DaaS automatically, and they don't even offer a cash price unless the customer specifically requests it. A couple of things to think about from your standpoint. The devices are rented to you, so you're responsible for them. You'll need to make sure that in your contract with your customer, you hold them responsible. In a worst case scenario, if the devices disappear, customer steals them or they blow up or something, there's a clause, an addendum in the contract with our third party that basically says if that device disappears at this point in time, let's say 17 months, here's how much you'll owe to pay it off. We have only seen that happen once, and that was an out-and-out fraud deal. So we do not see that happening very often. The other piece is accounting. Obviously, talk to your accountants. You won't be able to record an upfront sale because you don't own the device. typically you'll be recording some kind of a monthly recurring revenue and some kind of a monthly OPEX or a monthly cost of goods sold for the rental payment. And again, talk to your accountants about that. The slides in there, kind of can give you a lot more information, including that entire process flow. But that's pretty much the program in a nutshell. And we think it's pretty unique to the extent that you want something different. You don't want to be responsible. You want the upfront payment, right at the beginning. We have other options available as well. And Darren, who'll be on right after me, can talk more about that, and his team can certainly help you with that as well. So with that, I'm going to give it over to Darren, and we can go from there.
Hey guys, excited to be on the call. Really like the folks over at Rev.io. Thanks to Patrick and Delaney for putting this on, and we've enjoyed getting to know a lot of their partners and customers over the past couple of years doing the partner summit out in Atlanta. So hopefully once this craziness settles down, we'll be able to see each other again face to face. But just want to wrap up again here. Look, there's a real opportunity to grow. We're seeing the demand, and as Jeff pointed out in the beginning, we're seeing it also in the headset space, and with the work from home situation that's going on, it's a really powerful time to look at how are we monetizing not only the phones, which is the typical part of our service provider business, but also the headsets and and even video peripherals. And the cool thing with Poly is we do that all now. A couple of years ago when I joined Rev.io out in Atlanta, we only had phones to offer, but now as Poly, we're that entire company of Plantronics and Polycom and Obihai all squashed into one as Poly. And the DNA is very different now. We've got a company that looks at the solutions, the endpoint solutions for unified communications from end to end. And my sales team is ready and waiting to help you out at becoming a partner if you're not already a partner. And then there's various other things that our team does as well. Device as a service and getting you onboarded into that program is just one of the many things we do, including marketing development funds and helping you find the right pricing, the right distributor, information about the different devices that we have, and education and training and webinars and all sorts of things. But again, focus on the device as a service. It's all about the growth and the retention that we talked about, being able to know that you've got this OPEX offer out there and your customers are covered, your equipment's covered. And then ultimately, when you've seen the financial model, you're actually more profitable using other people's money. And the partners that we've got doing this, millions of dollars a year in partners using this, they're doing creative things like free phone offers. And they're out there also just turning it into profit as far as the ability to to rent and make more money on the device. So it really is a good model. And one of the things that I'll just hover on for a moment with the free phone offers, it's the companies that are doing it creatively are offering kind of an entry-level phone as a free phone. So if you look at something like our VVX 250, that's going to be sub $3 to you, right in that ballpark. And if you look at that as a free phone, then what we see our partners doing is say, yeah, but wait a second. If you upgrade to the VVX 350 or 450, we'll also throw in these couple extra features. And so there's more value in it. And you turn something that was initially kind of upside down as a free phone offer into actually something that's positive, because customers like that ability to get a little bit more for a little bit more money. And the value perception is right there, and it's really easy to see. The other thing that I would tell you too is we've actually had our partners tell us that doing the free phone actually gets them to be able to sell at a higher price. So just a quick example, if your offer for unified communications is $24.99, chances are that every day of the week you're going up against somebody, it might be a Ring Central or Vonage or somebody out there like that, and you're having to drop your price. So you drop down to $19.99. Well, you just gave up $5 in doing that. But when you go back to the same deal and say, well, look, I'm going to stay at my $24.99, but I'm going to throw in a free phone. all of a sudden the customer feels like that's a much more competitive offer. And the reality is you've only dropped your price $3 because that's your cost. So you actually are making money. Instead of dropping by $5, you're only dropping by $3, in the math of your books there. So a lot of good stuff here. We'd love to talk to you. If you'll flip to the next slide, Jeff, I just want to make sure that we've got kind of the process here. One is to use the Device as a Service program, you've got to be a Poly partner, and my team can help onboard you to do that. Once you're a Poly partner, we sign you up for the Device as a Service program, and then you go sell, and you start realizing those benefits that we've talked about throughout the session. So let's jump to the last slide here, and I just want to give you contact information. I'm sure we can share this deck afterward as well, but if you can take down our sales support number there, toll-free number, and then to email us, it's as simple as itspsales@poly.com. Again, that's itspsales@poly.com. I manage the group. There's my contact information as well. And one of the things that we're offering for everybody on the webinar today is if you're a new partner, or maybe you've been a partner but really haven't transacted much with us and haven't been doing much with us, for getting started, we're going to give you $500 worth of free demo gear, and that could be in the form of phones, conference phones, or headsets. Just anything that our reps talk to you about and you find that's interesting, you want to test out, put in your lab. We're going to give you $500 worth of free gear as a new partner or as sort of a reactivated partner. So really encourage you guys to reach out to us. I do want to see if there are any questions. Delaney, if we can just go ahead and leave that screen up there and then start taking some questions. Go ahead and leave the contact up. Yeah, that'd be great.
Great. Darren, Jeff, and Tom, thank you guys so much for your time. Before we begin the Q&A portion of the presentation, I'd like to thank our audience for joining us today and review a few housekeeping items. The first reminder is that we're always interested in topics that you'd like to learn more about, so please submit your topic ideas in the Q&A box. In addition, the full webinar recording will be emailed to you within 2 weeks. Lastly, if you've submitted any questions during the presentation that don't get addressed in the live Q&A, we will be following up with you individually via email. Now I'd like to ask a few questions from our audience. In which countries or regions is Poly's Device as a Service program available?
Tom, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, currently it's only available in the US and Canada. We have other options available globally though.
Who provides technical support for devices delivered through the Poly Device as a Service program?
I can take that one. So the tech support it's no different than if you purchase the phone or you purchase the headset. So our headsets are handled by the legacy Plantronics group. We've got a group of tech support folks there, and there's a phone number to reach out for those guys. Our reps can give you that contact information, but on the phone side, it's going to be through our standard Poly Global Support team, just like you've always done it before.
Can customers rent directly from the third-party Device as a Service provider, or does it need to go through the service provider?
For our specific Device as a Service model and the third party that we use, it is only through the service provider. However, we have other options that can rent it directly to the customer.
Well, great. Thanks again for your time. Everyone enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, Delaney. Thanks, Patrick. Appreciate it.
Thanks.